This time last year, I nearly died. I ended up in hospital for 11 days, and it was only 2 days after my wedding as well. So as you can imagine, it's been on my mind over the last few days. Probably why I look so tired, not sleeping properly. So this week, I wanted to talk through my experience, sort of get it off my chest a little bit. Before that, just a very quick update. Last week I did 82 kilometers. This week I've got 88, so a little bit scared about that. But I actually finished my decking on Friday, which means that my legs actually get a chance to recover in between sessions now, which is lovely. So let me walk you through what actually happened this time last year. So as I said, on Friday, got married, had the best day. It was just absolutely lovely, perfect. Saturday, woke up, a little bit hungover, a little bit tired, but pretty normal, and just chilled out all day. Sunday, I get up early to have my breakfast, go out for my long run, and about an hour after getting up, I started to feel like I had flu symptoms. I felt quite achy, quite tired. And as the day went on, this seemed to get worse and worse and worse. And normally, if I have a cold or anything like that, I honestly just sort of get on with it. I even go out running if the cold's not too bad. So Hayley knew straight away that something wasn't quite right. Now, luckily, she looked up on Triple One the symptoms that I had, and one of the things said about bruising under the skin that doesn't go away if you press on it. I think it's called blanching or something like that. It got to about 9 in the evening, and I'd actually been back in bed for a few hours. Luckily, I just went up to go to the toilet, and I noticed this bruising under my skin. So I called Hayley up, and she called Triple One, and they got an ambulance out to blue light me into hospital. If I'd have gone to sleep, I might not have woken up. If it had been a few hours more, I could have easily have lost my limbs, because what I had was meningococcal septicaemia. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if you haven't heard of this before, because I hadn't, but it's bacterial sepsis. So basically, I caught a bacterial infection, probably from the wedding. 20% of people have it at the back of their throats at all time, but they're asymptomatic. I was a bit run down, and I caught it. What it does is it pumps toxins into your blood, and what those bruises were actually bleeding under my skin, where the toxins were destroying my small blood vessels. Next, it would move on to my internal organs, and where it's destroying all the small blood vessels, that's where I could have lost limbs. The time when the ambulance crew arrived is very hazy for me. I was quite out of it, and I can't remember a good 2 or 3 hours there, which is a bit scary. But I do remember when I got into hospital, which I'll talk about in a minute. I got my interval session to do first, which is 6 times 1K at 4 minutes a kilometre with 90 seconds walking rest. So let me get that done, and then we'll carry on talking.
Just in case you're new to the channel, I'm actually training for the Yorkshire Marathon in October, where I'm aiming to get under 3 hours, which for me is still a very scary target, but things seem to be going well to get me there on track.
Oh, that was tough, but it's meant to be. It's an interval session, and I nailed all the paces as well, so really happy with that. Let's see how my legs feel when my legs work out when I get home. Let me get my breath back, and then I'll carry on with the story. So I made it into the hospital, and they gave me some antibiotics on the way, which definitely saved my life again. And when I got in, they took blood, put another IV in me, gave me a load more antibiotics, and not really being kept in a loop with what was going on. Hayley drove in, she was waiting outside, and the paramedic came out and went, "He is not a very well man," which shows you just how ill I was. After an hour or two, they moved me on to just like the A&E ward. That's when the pain started kicking in. It felt like the muscles are being ripped from my legs, like literally just torn off the bone. It is excruciating, and because I didn't know what was wrong with me, they could only give me very basic pain relief, no morphine, anything like that. So there's nothing I could really do about it. I had it in my head that if I could get up and walk around, then my legs would actually feel better. It felt like they needed to move. So I started doing that. Over the next day, I just thought honestly that I caught a really bad bug, and I was on the way to being better. So I started getting up and moving around more. I was very stiff, but I could move around. I could get myself to the toilet, things like that. I was in for another night, and I was hooked up to a blood pressure monitor. So that would go off, I think it's every half an hour, every hour. So I get woken up by that as well, which doesn't really help. The timeline gets a bit blurry now. So I went in Sunday like 1 o'clock in the morning. I believe it was about Tuesday that the blood test results came back. And rather than the doctor coming and telling me, what's happening, what's wrong. I got a call from UK Disease Control, tracking my movements to see if anyone else had maybe caught it. But apart from that, I was kept in the dark again, not knowing what was wrong with me or how serious it was. That wasn't until either just before I got out of hospital, or actually when I got out, I looked up what I had and realised how close I came. Unfortunately, that's just the beginning of the story and the beginning of the trauma. So I'll carry on with the next stages tomorrow. Wednesday morning, 9 a.m. It's already about 24 degrees. My legs are knackered from yesterday, which all adds up to mean I'm going to take today as slow as I can. I always tend to speed up when I'm filming, so I'm going to consciously try and run a little bit slower. Anyway, back to the story. I got my diagnosis, not from the doctor, but then I got moved onto the general ward into an isolation room where I'd spend the rest of my time in hospital. And this bit was quite hard because it meant that hardly anyone could come in to see me. And even when Hayley came in, she'd have to wear a mask, gown, gloves. So there's no physical contact. So it's obviously very lonely and very isolating. And although my legs felt okay the day before, from that point on, every day they were getting worse and worse and worse. I'd only be able to get up and go to the toilet, and even doing that, I'd have to use my IV stand as a crutch because I was constantly hooked up to antibiotics. And I remember the feeling of it. All my feet swelled up and it was like walking on hot coals. All my muscles would ache really badly. There'll be shooting pains through my foot. So I was literally dragging myself to the toilet because I had this big thing in my mind of I didn't want to use a bedpan. I felt that was my last bastion. Everything else had been taken away from me at that point. I was in control of nothing. That was the one thing I had the tiniest bit of control over. Add to that, my pain relief needs weren't being listened to at all. The main problem was what I was having wasn't really working. The timings weren't right either. So I'd be given medication during the day, go to sleep at night, wake up in the middle of the night in excruciating pain to be told that I'd had all that I could have for that day of that medication. The consultant would only come and see me once a day. Looking back, I probably shouldn't have listened to much of what he said, because at that point he said, oh, you might be going home in a few days. I'd be there for another week. But every day when he'd come and see me, I'd explain the problem. And he'd say, yeah, okay, yeah, we'll fix this. And every night I'd wake up with the same pain. It was just draining. I wasn't sleeping, I was lonely, I was in pain. And it's just hard to get through. And this all culminated on Saturday morning, where it was the lowest of the low. This is going to be the hardest part of the video for me to talk about because it's possibly one of the lowest times in my life, but it's something I want to get out and move forward, which I have done, but with it being the anniversary, it's sort of coming back up again. So on the Friday, I was told by the consultant, yeah, your medication's sorted, you're going to get it overnight, it's all good. I only need to wake up at about 5 a.m. on Saturday morning.
So it's currently 5 in the morning, and I thought I'd have my pain medication finally sorted out this time, but they haven't updated the chart, so I'm not due paracetamol till 8 o'clock. And then I'm about to go into some serious amount of pain.
So I managed to get through that 3 or 4 hours, and then I had a new nurse come into my room that I hadn't met before, and I explained how much pain I was in, and he just disappeared off for about 40 minutes while he got my medication. And I know I got other patients to see, but I was in quite a bad state. When he came back in, I was crying uncontrollably. I couldn't hold anything in. It hurt so much. I was so tired and so alone and not being listened to. And he walked in and he asked my name, he asked my date of birth, he gave me the pain medication and he left. Not even, are you okay? Do you want someone to speak to? No, just left on my own again. And yeah, that was tough. So again, I broke down crying. My friend actually called me at that point and I couldn't speak. he'd done a lot more reading about what I had than I'd done, and he was worried I'd actually lost my legs at that point. So I sort of started to feel better with the pain medication, and Hayley had come in and I needed to go to the toilet, but it was so painful. So then I said, do you want to try doing it in a wheelchair? Getting out there in a wheelchair, because it's only about 10 steps to the toilet. So I tried to lift myself off and onto the wheelchair, and I managed to make it in, but now my arms were in excruciating pain. It's like everything was all cramping at once, and I just had to try and make it back into bed again and make it through the next hour in pain. But that's when I knew I was bedbound, and I had to let go of my ego and actually just use a bedpan. The rest of that day I didn't cry much more, but I was just so inward on myself. I'd lost hope. I didn't know what was happening to me. No one was explaining why my legs were just hurting so much. I was just being told that's the side effects of what you've got, which doesn't explain what's actually happening within my body. I was just completely left in the dark. But that was the lowest point, and then the next day it is time to turn it all around. Well, if I thought yesterday's run was a hot one, this is taking it to the next level. I think it's about 28 degrees and it's about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Normally I'm a early morning runner, 9 a.m. But I had an amazing shoot this morning where I met a legend called George the Therapy Pony. That just means I've had to go out a little bit later and just slow my run right down even more, because my heart rate is obviously a lot higher where it's a lot hotter. Anyway, so I got through the worst day, the Saturday. When I woke up on a Sunday, I had a bit of a new resolve. I decided to stop, say feeling sorry for myself, but you know what I mean. Decided to take control of what I could and start moving on. So my idea was to basically make a video that I could put out on LinkedIn, just letting people know where I was and what was happening. And that gave me the focus for the day. As well as that, I had a new nurse who was the most amazing guy I ever met. He did absolutely everything for me to try and get my pain medication sorted and to make me feel normal. He made me laugh. So just having that support around me really helped me change my mindset and get myself moving forward. I couldn't get out of bed, but there are other things that I could control. So I'm going to keep this part nice and short today because it is so hot, and just concentrate on getting this 13k easy run done. And then we'll carry on tomorrow. I've got a tempo session in the morning. Hopefully it's going to be a little bit cooler. Isn't it amazing what a few degrees can make? It's Friday morning, 9 a.m. I think it's about 19, 20 degrees. And that actually feels quite fresh compared to recently. This morning we've got a tempo session, a little bit scared about it. 3k warm up, which I'm on now. And then got 5 lots of alternating Ks. 1k at 4:10 and then 1k at 4:50. 5 times 3k cool down. But if you know me, if you watched any of my videos, you know I train to heart rate rather than pace with these sort of runs. So it'll be 1k in zone 4 and then 1k in zone 3. Still horrible. So I've changed my mindset and I'm looking at what I can control, but nothing really happens until Tuesday, and I get an occupational therapist come around and see how I'm doing. And she says to me, do you want to try and stand up? Problem is, I know if I try and stand up, it's in agony. So I say no, but I do say I will try and swing my legs over, because then I'll know whether I can get up or not. And amazingly, I swing my legs over the bed, I don't feel anything. It's such relief, such surprise, such joy. So then I think, all right, I'm gonna try and stand up. And I stand up and nothing. And that was it for day. She said, right, we need to do a scan, make sure you haven't got any blood clots, and then I'll get someone back round tomorrow and we'll start to get you moving. That's all well and good. I had my scan, nothing there, but I never saw another occupational therapist again. I asked many times because I wanted to know what I was doing was right, but I just had to take it in my own hands and do it myself. So what I did was started doing some leg exercises in bed, started doing some leg lifts, things like that, just to get my legs moving again. Then I'd start to stand up with the aid of a Zimmer frame and just walk around the room a little bit and lie back down again. It's absolutely knackering because I hadn't used those muscles properly in a while, because although I was only properly bedbound for 4 days, all the days leading up to that, the only time I got out of bed was like 2 or 3 times a day to go to the toilet, so my muscles are basically wasted away. And then I believe it was Wednesday, I got the final all clear that I definitely wasn't infectious. And that meant I could start walking out onto the ward. I actually went and met Hayley at the entrance of the ward to surprise her, which was lovely. So speaking of getting moving and building up your strength, I'm gonna get this Sempo session done and I'll check in with you at the end, let you know how I got on.
Just in case you want to know, you can see my heart rate gauge in the top left hand side, and I want to be doing 1 kilometre in the green and then 1 kilometre in the orange. But you'll also notice my pace in the bottom left, and I'm not hitting those paces even though I'm in the right zone.
Well, I got that wrong. It's actually 4 reps instead of 5, which I'm quite glad about because my legs are so tired that I just struggle to get any pace in them whatsoever. But unfortunately, it does mean I'm 1.5 kilometres further away from home than I should be. So I got to add that onto the extra onto the end. Bit of a change of plan for this morning. I was going to go to park run, but yesterday after my failed session, which I'll talk about in a second, I was just so tired. My legs were so tired. I thought, no, I'm not going to set an alarm. I'm just going to rest and give my body what it needs to recover. So I've had a nice lie-in and now I'm just on a 12k run. Legs still feel quite tired, but that's understandable. So I don't know how I feel about yesterday. It's the first run I've had like that in quite a long time, probably on this plan, where my legs just didn't want to work. And although I kept it in the right heart rate zones, the paces were so off. They were so off that runners actually slowed down my training plan, which is a good thing. Still predicts I'll be able to do it for between 2 hours 52 and 3 hours, so that's perfect. But I'm just hoping that this is the last week before a deload week, so I've just got a lot of accumulated fatigue in my legs, and after this deload week, it's going to be feeling a lot better. Now, I've spoken about how I was built up slowly to walking with a Zimmer frame, and it got to the Friday and they were saying they're going to keep me until Monday because I still had a lot of antibiotics. I needed a daily course for another 3 days. Luckily they arranged it so that I could come into hospital and have those as giant injections. What shocks me though is how I actually felt when I got home. So during the day when I found out I was going to go home that day, it's quite a long wait, but I was really excited. But then when I actually pulled up on a drive and walked through those doors, I just felt absolutely nothing. There's no emotion there whatsoever. And it's such a strange feeling. I don't know if it's like all the trauma that I went through. And to be honest, I haven't gone through all of it here because it would just be too long. But all that I went through was sort of finally over. And there's my body just, I don't know, shutting down a little bit. And that's why I started counselling, because I knew that wasn't quite right. And counselling really helped me a lot. It's helped me get through this. The other thing that's helped me get through was the determination to get back running. And I knew I needed to take that really slowly. So it's a long run tomorrow, 25k. I'm actually going to do a race in the middle of it, which will be fun. But I'll tell you, to round it all up, my journey back to where I am now. And here we are, Sunday morning, 25k to do. After that, that'll be about 90 kilometres for the week. So to think from where I came from last year to here now is absolutely crazy. So I came home, but that wasn't the end of it. I had nerve damage in my right foot, and for about 2 or 3 months, just randomly, multiple times throughout the day, I'll get shooting pain in my foot, like a real burning sensation. So I'd be woken up in the middle of the night. But I knew my main thing was I wanted to get running again. At that point, I could only walk for maybe 5 minutes at a time. I remember first time I went up the stairs, how hard that felt. So I got in touch with an osteopath and booked in a session and got some advice. And she said, once you can walk for an hour and not feel completely wiped out from the rest of the day, then you can start your running again. So that's what I did. Over a course of a month, I just went out every day, longer and longer and longer, until I reached that hour mark. So now we're talking October sort of time. And then I started a Couch to 5k program. And within 6 weeks of building up very gradually, I was back to my first 5k park run, which was an amazing feeling. I then set my sights on a 10k. I did that in December, where I paced my friend to a new 10k PB, and I could feel I just had a lot more in the tank at that point. It's absolutely incredible how quickly your fitness can rebound after something like this. So after that 10k, then I really wanted to start pushing myself. I upped my training from 3 days to 4 days a week, and I set my sight on the Brighton Half Marathon for March, and I refocused on my goal from before I got ill, which was a sub 90 minute half marathon. It wasn't the best conditions. I was shivering on the start line for half an hour where all my hip flexors tightened up. That being said, I got a 1:29.08, which I was really, obviously very, very happy with. That was really cathartic. It felt like I'd regained what I'd lost, and it happened a lot more quickly than I thought it would. I thought it'd take me over a year to get back my fitness, but it took about 5 or 6 months. And that pretty much brings us back up to where we are today. After that, I did a couple of races, but then set my sights on a sub-3 hour marathon and started a 26-week block so I could build up really gradually over that time. And as we're running today, it's 11 weeks to go. So this video might have been a bit self-indulgent, but I hope you've enjoyed the story and maybe gotten a little bit from it yourself. So I've got this 10k to do. I'll do a 10k race with my friend and then 5k to finish it off. And I'll see you next week where I'll be sharing that 10k race with you. Have a great one.